hate waiting. Oh, I've got my wrong glasses on. Okay, we're going to start anyway. Are we ready? Hi, this is Nancy Robson with On Point TV. Just in case you're wondering, yes, I have my wrong glasses on. That means that every time I come over here to look at the comments, I have to tip my head up like an old lady to look at the comments. And so now the truth is out. I'm an old lady. So, hi, how is everybody doing? Go ahead and make comments. I can see my comments. I can see them too here. So if you have any comments, questions, I really love questions. So if you have any questions, that would be really great. And, if it's about what we're working on or, life in general, I'll even handle life in general. Athena goes, what? So we're doing a live today, our continuation of the road home. So the road home is a block of the month series that I showed you about 6 months ago when we did a moving sale for fireside quilts. So this is available. Oh, I gotta skip my ads here in a second. There. All right. So Fireside Quilts was having a moving sale because my friend Laura, who lives just northwest of us here in Grand Rapids, was moving to a larger location. And I just went through it. It was the funnest thing. Go back and find it because I thought it was really, really fun. We just showed everything in her store. It's an online store. So pretty much that meant it was a bedroom and now it's just a bigger bedroom. But this was one of the items. And people really loved the idea of this one. It's called the Road Home. It is made completely out of batiks from Wilmington Print, and it's a really cool quilt. It is 90 inches square, and the pattern would have all of the fabrics for the 90-inch square top and binding and the instructions. But I decided to do an instructional video on it, and not because the instructions are bad, but the instructions are minimal. Let's go with that. All right. So last time we did the bear paw, and if I had been just a little bit more planning, I would have brought the bear paw out. I didn't bring it out. Hi, everybody. Australia, thank you very much, Jillian. Eva from Iowa. I'm heading to Iowa in the end of November. My niece and nephew are in the Northern Iowa State University marching band, so I'm going to go see a march in the end of November. Hi. Yep. Hi, Constance, and I'm hoping you got the pattern. So Constance is a quilt addict. Like, honestly, I'm sure that most of you are quilt addicts too. It's just something that we are, right? But being a Quilt Addict member means that you pay a monthly fee, which helps me do what I'm doing. And in reply to that, I actually give you perks. And one of the perks is every time I make a new pattern, you get the e-pattern of that. And so I sent it, and yes, Constant got it. We've been having some troubles. So this is the block of the month we're working on. This is the pattern that I've made, which is available at onpoint-tv.com. I did create a link below that takes you directly to it. It is an e-pattern, and I just kind of want to give you the idea of what the difference is in the instructions. So the instructions for the quilt from Wilmington are fine if you know what you're doing, which leads me to this. If you don't know what you're doing, if you're feeling like, why does Nancy always seem to be talking over my head? Because I'm assuming, which is never a good idea, that you've already done some of my other series. So for instance, my Great Basics series. This is a series that I can't remember how many videos there are, but takes you literally from the very, very beginning of quilt making, folding your fabric, how to cut, how to pick a proper scant quarter-inch seam allowance, all that stuff. That's in the Great Basics series, and this is the book. And hi, in Nova Scotia, and Roxanne got hers too. Good, a couple of you from Australia. Hi, Australia. I think it's super early where you guys are. Well, after Great Basics came Learning to Quilt, which actually was the first video series that we ever did. Started it out at a TV station here in Grand Rapids, the public access station. Just FYI, if you have a local public access station, you too can make your own video series because anything that you make, they get to air and you can put it wherever you want, including YouTube. Yay. So if you're still feeling like, you're kind of overwhelmed, Great Basics, then there's Learning to Quilt. And we've just started airing the Great Lakes Voyage, which is lovingly known as Learning to Quilt 2. So taking the things that you've learned from Great Basics and Learning to Quilt 1, and then kind of ramping it up to some techniques that are a little bit, little not harder, but more skills. It takes more skills to do them. There you go. I don't want anyone ever to think that the books are hard. I can't do that. That's too hard. That sounds like my friend Mary, who always starts every project with, I can't do that. Nancy, I can't do that. And so I have to tell her, Mary, I'm a professional. You can do this. So Mary's going to crack up when she sees this. All right. So that's where you may want to start. But then you could go and do projects like this. So the road home instructions, as a point of order, the instructions for this block, which you'll make 8 of them. Oops, Athena, put the camera down. Sorry. The instructions for this block, this is an uneven log cabin, which actually has a little bit of a kind of cool thing here with the squares, and I'll kind of show you a little bit more of that as we go. But the entire instructions for this block are right there. Can you see how I've kind of like written all over it? Trying to simplify things. So if these kind of instructions, minus all of my like markings all over everything, don't seem to be enough for you, then consider purchasing my pattern. Because in my pattern, not only do I give you a couple of different settings, so different settings that you can do if all you make is that block, and I'll show you the quilt behind me a little bit more, but my instructions are very, very detailed. Like, this is the instructions for the first part of the block. This is the instructions for the second log, the third log. Very, very detailed instructions. So if you feel like you get overwhelmed when you look at instructions that are like that, that's why I'm doing this series, so that you'll have another option, something else to help you through. So let's get started with this block. Let me find the original one there. Is that it? Nope. Nope, that's not it either. I'll find it later. Okay. So what I want to take you through today, just a little bit, is the fabrics. So one little tip. So this is a tip for when you're working on a project like this. I do not cut everything first. I know that some instructions tell you cut before you start sewing, or even read the entire thing before you start. Yeah, I've never done that either. Hello, Mojo. Hi, Aussie. That's 3 Aussies today. Pennsylvania, Scotland. Hello, Scotland. Wow. Everybody's out there today. That's really cool.
Remind our Aussie fans that I'm looking for an Aussie.
Oh, and Athena wanted to remind our Aussie fans that Athena is looking for an Aussie husband. She's quite adorable. When you meet her, you're just going to love her. She is my niece, so I gotta have to say that. And she's 30 years old, so something around that kind. Okay, she's 32. That's okay. She's kind of short though, so just kind of keep that in mind.
God, you had
Okay,
that bad.
I did. Well, I didn't want to be false advertising. Anyhow, check your spam folder, Georgia, because I definitely sent it out. All right. So when you're working on a project like this, oftentimes patterns will tell you to cut everything out. So for instance, when it comes to this, the first instructions are to cut everything out. No way. I am never going to do that. I am as a cut as I go kind of quilter. And so that's how my pattern works. I have you cut, then you piece. I have you cut, and then you piece. So when you're organizing a block like this, or a quilt like this, where you get all the fabrics, I mean, these are the fabrics that all come in the block of the month, the road home that you get from Fireside Quilts. Oh my goodness, good night, Germany. So we have Australia and Georgia wants to do some matchmaking. That's what you were giggling about. Thanks, Georgia. All right, although you're not in Australia, but you might know an Aussie, you never know. So this is how I prepare my fabric. I fold my fabric like I tell you how to do in these other series, and I've labeled it with whatever label they have given it in the pattern. And why I like doing this, not only is if I need to cut this, I open it up, I can start cutting it. I don't need to prepare it first. I don't need to refold it. And as I'm cutting and I get things that are left over, I leave those leftover things within my fold. So if we go to the A fabric, when I unfold it, look at There's some leftover pieces of the things that I've done. So I recommend that that's what you do, that you get your fabrics out, you fold them like I show you how to fold them in Great Basics and Learning to Quilt, and label them, and then you can keep any extra scraps you have within the fabric. So if all of a sudden you go, oh, I need a 2-inch strip, oh, look at that. It's a 2-inch strip left over from some other part of the project, okay? So this is what I'm working on. So if we can go up here, Athena. So this is as far as I am in the road home at this point. I did the bear paw in the middle with the extra log cabin stripping going around it. And these are the uneven log cabins. And what makes uneven log cabins so cool is the movement that you get from them. So I'm going to take this one down and hopefully not take my quilt down in the process. This is the quilt from the pattern. So when you're looking at that, I see movement. I look at that and I'm like, there is movement in that quilt. And this is a very, very easy setting for log cabin, uneven log cabin, that kind of an idea, where I think they called this one Fields and Farrows, where it actually goes just on the diagonal. What I like about this setting is you can make any size and it's going to be it's going to work. Whereas when you look in the pattern I made you, I also gave you some other setting options, right? So when I looked at this, it totally looks to me like a flag flying, where there's that much movement to it. So our Quilt Guild is planning, our West Michigan Quilters Guild, our show will be April 1st and 2nd this year, 2022. Not this year, next year. And we're actually doing a Quilts of Valor kind of theme. And we're going to be making quilts for some veterans that are going to come in and we'll do the ceremonies for them. And this one does have a little bit of pink in it, which pink is pink. But I do think I'm going to make this one maybe for one of our female veterans that is in our guild. So we'll see. Yeah, Great Lakes kit. So you've got a lot of, Georgia's already picked up a lot of fabric for the Great Lakes voyage, so she can't get this kit too. But if you're interested, it's there. So I've decided to make my quilt using the uneven log cabin. So this is the actual one from the road home, but let me show you how you can do it with some easier techniques than just cut all these little strips and put things together. First, I picked my fabrics. What I really like, one thing that I really like about this is this line of squares that goes through the center here. That's totally unique to an uneven log cabin. That is not a normal uneven log cabin. Normally an uneven log cabin, this strip would be complete. This strip would be complete. But this, with this added little bit of squares there, I just think it turned out really cool. I love the different kind of pizzazz it gives it. Right? So for mine, this is the colors that I chose for that center little strip. And so I just did a white on white all the way up to a gray. And then I actually had a black here that I couldn't find any more of it right now. So that's my center little squares. This is my larger squares. So when you're looking at the original one, it would be, my larger strips, it would be these here. And this is where I'm going to show you some efficient cutting. So this is when I'd say, don't do what the pattern says, do what I say instead. Actually, I think I say that all the time. All right, so these are my colors for that, going with the light red, which, yes, is pink, all the way up to a darker one. And I gotta tell you, this one is so cool because there's so much going on in this monochromatic print that when it comes time that the pieces go together, can we show up on the big quilt again? So on the quilt, these two large 2-inch strips are at some point going to come together. Now also the little 3/4 inch strips here, but they're so small I don't think it makes that big of a deal. But for this section here where these two come together, I love using a print like this that has a lot of different colors. It's not just like, I would not have wanted to use this more solid red batik here, because then it would look like I had a 4-inch wide strip of red batik. But because I chose this fabric and there's so much going on with this fabric, you don't get the feeling that it's just those two pieces together. So if you come down to this now, you can see what I mean. So look at this great piece. This is a piece from, I think this is Tim Holtz. It's a distressed burgundy. It's a new one from Tim Holtz. But you see how the fabrics, how the differences that you get in the colors. Whereas, you know, the pink looks like the pink. Our our gimbal is growling at us. So, all right, so far nothing's gone bad, right? So this is what I'm going to recommend, that when you pick your fabric for this, maybe try to find something that's got a little bit of extra color. So here's my 5 reds. And then here is my 5 blues, again, going from light to dark, but these are only going to be 3/4 inch strips. So let's get started. So when you start a project like this, whoops, the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do is do not cut the way they tell you to. So in the instructions for the road to home, and this honestly is how most instructions for log cabins, sashings, those kinds of things are going to be. They're going to tell you to cut a bunch of little squares. Then take those little squares and piece them together, one at a time. Tedium, tedium, tedium. That does not sound like something I want to do. So instead, take the strip that it tells you and sew that strip together. After that strip is sewn together, square up an edge, and actually I would fold this. So let's just fold this. I would fold it in half, so I'm cutting 2 at a time, right? Because that just makes way more sense. These need to be cut 1 1/4 for this particular project. Then it's already sewn together. All right. So I hope that you can already see the difference. Instead of cutting out all these little squares, sew the strips together first. Then after you have sewn the strips together, the next particular instructions for this quilt is to take a 2-inch piece, because this now measures 2 inches, and sew that together. Right? Also, considering the pressing. When possible, press to the darker fabric. It will not be always possible in any quilt, but when possible, do that. And here it's pressed to the dark from the strip. And when I put the other 2-inch log on it, I pressed it to the point of least resistance. So I'm not pressing on that seam, letting that seam press over, and pressing it to the dark side. So when it comes to the next piece for you to put on, same kind of thing. They tell you to cut individual squares of the gray and individual squares of the light pink. Well, you do have to cut some individual squares of the light pink, but instead of cutting individuals, cut the strip, then cut the strip, sew the strip, then cut the strip into the segments that you need. So on this quilt, and another Germany, and Ludington, Michigan. Thank you very much, Ludington. We're just down here in Grand Rapids. We're waving to you right now. Okay, so in this quilt, you're going to take that section, which at this point is 2 inches, and you're going to piece a 2-inch square onto it. There's no fast way to do this. I don't like taking a whole strip and putting all the squares on and sewing it. That's just not accurate enough for me. Going to take that and piece that on. Then you're going to be able to take this section and piece, whoops, I got to do, there it goes this way. So it'll be like that. So you'll kind of be pre-sewing some strips before you cut them. And you will do that throughout the quilt. So for instance, when it comes time for the next log, it told you to cut some 2-inch wide strips. Then from those 2-inch wide strips, cut these, I think, 3.5-inch segments. Well, instead of doing that, I cut a 3.5-inch wide strip, sewed my 2-inch strip to it, and then cut them into the segments. So I don't have to take that square and piece that little square onto that little square. Think it through. As a general rule, when you're looking at strip quilts like this, where it's all, lots of strips going on, as a general rule, if it says cut 2 inches by 6.5 inches, switch it around. Cut 6.5 inches and then cut 2 inch segments out of that. And in this case, cut the 6.5, sew your strip on it first, and then cut it. It is just so much more efficient and so much more accurate. So just a couple of more steps to get through on this one. Next section. So here's a piece where I've got the original square done. I've added the pink, then I add just the strips of the blue, then I add the pink again, another blue, and a red. At this point in time, with any of the with any kind of a log cabin like this, at this point, I'm about 3 logs in. I'm going to trim it up to whatever, square it up to whatever size it is supposed to be. This is supposed to be 8 inches. It's pretty darn close, and I don't know if you can see here, but it is bowing out there in the center of the logs, and that is just standard operating procedure with a log cabin. Drives me crazy. I try to be so accurate with my sewing, but yet it always happens. Now, I will not square it up after every single one, so especially not the little ones, but as I get about 3 logs in, I'm always going to square up my block so I don't have these kind of bowed strips, which you can imagine when you get done, your block ain't so square. It just kind of looks like a fat circle, which nobody wants that. Then you're going to continue piecing it on. Here you can see where I've got my other strips where I've already sewed the square onto it from the strip making process. Then we get to here, kind of a little bit more. Oh, let's kind of move that out of the way. A little more of the same. So after I've sewed on, after I've trimmed this block, then I sew a strip on here. Then I'm going to add this one. And I love these little squares going through. It's also pretty cool too, because when you're piecing this, you're going to be able to connect that seam, butt that seam right together. So when I sew this, I would sew it with the strip on the bottom. It's cut to the exact size I need. So I'm going to pin here at the intersection, and then I'm going to pin at the other side because I know that that's the size it needs to be. It bows out because there are more seams in the end, so more stability there. I don't know, Georgia, I think it bows out because when you're sewing a long strip like this, you just kind of drift a little bit in the middle, and it always bugs me. I mean, it happens every kind of log cabin I make, even the Quilt as You Go log cabin. When I taught that one, that's what I taught you about. You got to draw your line because you can't cut it because there's batting, to make it actually end up square. So then we've got this one. So this is our final one. It's looking pretty good here. This is the final one for the dark blue. Then this strip goes on, and then this one matches up there. So then, bada boom, bada bing, you would have your uneven log cabin. So it really is not, it's not a hard block. But by following my instructions, the idea of cutting the big section first, then cutting that into the smaller sections, you're going to find that the block is going to be much more accurate. And if you need more instructions, even if you're doing just the road home block, keep in mind this is the instructions they give you. I did very much so appreciate their numbering system here. Can you see that? Higher? The lettering that they used, that really helped me quite a bit. It actually even shows some sizes that were there. That was very, very helpful. I think that if you follow that, you'll do pretty good. But if you feel like you need more instruction, If this whole thing is way over your head, go back to the Great Basics book, maybe learning to quilt. You're not ready for the Great Voyage yet, okay? No, no, no. Great Lakes Voyage yet. We're just going to skip the lake part and just call it a Great Voyage. So there's a lot to learn when you're doing quilting, and this is just one of those steps in learning and how to keep quilts blocks like this all straight and square. So the next time we get together will not be in November. From here, I'm starting to do some teaching. I'm going to teach in Washington, which I'm really excited about, seeing my friend Cheryl and her group. And then I go down to Quilt Festival in Houston. A lot of classes going on. Market canceled, but Quilt Festival is still going on. They're expecting a really, really great turnout. I feel bad for the people like in Australia and Canada and stuff that are not actually able to get into the United States yet, which is quite the shame. But the show is going on. So if it's possible for you to get down there, you want to see a great show, go to quilts.com. That's their website. It's the easiest website ever. So in November, our live, thank you for reminding me, Georgia, is going to be on making a super simple Christmas tree skirt. It's one that we designed in the Electric Quilt membership. So if you're interested in learning more about Electric Quilt, click that join button that you should be seeing like below the video here, and it'll tell you more about membership, but Electric Quilt training is part of that. So we'll be doing that Christmas tree skirt, but then after that, our next block, here it is, will be this block, which looks suspiciously familiar, but it's not. It is a really higher, lower, higher. It is a really interesting version of a log cabin, but it's not a log cabin. It's not a courthouse steps. I looked through my Electric Quilt book of blocks and I can't figure out what it is, but I did design it. So I have designed it up so that when we come back next time, we will talk about super simple ways of making that. And I'll make something along these lines. So these are just colors in EQ. Not quite sure if these are the colors I'm going to stick with, but Athena and I both like them. So that will be our December live. So probably the second week of December on the Thursday is when we'll get together to continue with Road to Home. Now, if you are working on your Road to Home quilt, you don't have to stop. You can do your center bear paw. Then you can do your uneven log cabins that are here, but then you can go ahead and work on the other bear paw blocks within the quilt, because we've already done a video on how to make bear paw, so you could be working on those before we actually get to working on this interesting log cabin courthouse step kind of thing. Was that glaring a little bit?
Oh, no, I can see it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right, there we go. I do expect to have fun. Thank you, Roxanne. Is there any other questions? I'm looking now. Memphis, Tennessee. Decided longer at work just to watch. All right, that's pretty cool, Scotty. Thank you very much. Don't tell your bosses. I won't tell them if you don't tell them. Is there any other questions? All right. I know there's a little bit of a delay. Another Georgia, a lot of Georgia and people from Georgia at the very same time. There's a little bit of a delay, so maybe there's a question that I just don't know about. If you have any questions, please, you can leave a comment below. The algorithm or the magic math that YouTube uses loves it when you give me a thumbs up. And they love it when you make a comment. And I promise to at least thumbs up every comment or answer your question. If you have a question, I will answer that question right there on the comments section. Now, if it's a longer question and you need to include pictures, then go ahead and send me an email. My email is quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. I'd be happy to help you with any questions at all. Another Australian. Wow. Thank you, Australia, for being here and listening to me. That's really, really cool. So that's all we got for tonight. Quick kind of video for a live for us. Usually they go a little bit longer, so this is kind of cool that it was a short one. I will be seeing you hopefully in Houston if you happen to be one of the lucky people to go there. If you have any questions, you know how to contact me. And then we'll see my EQ designers. We'll see you in 2 weeks, I think. I can't quite remember. It's normally the 4th, but I fourth Thursday, but I don't think that is this time. Oh, no, it's next week, Thursday. Right after I get back from Washington, I'll be seeing you guys. Okay? Talk to you soon. Have a great night.